Hi guys, welcome back to another TBM tutorial. This time I'll show you how to do an NDB approach or non-directional beacon. Okay, cool. First things first, you're gonna need to need an approach plate. Okay, which looks something like this. Now you can use any approach plate that you want. You can use JEP charts, FAA charts. It's all exactly the same thing. So we are going to do an NDB runway 17 approach at Bathurst, New South Wales, Australia. Okay, cool. So all that good stuff out of the way. So what is an NDB approach? An NDB approach is a non-directional beacon, which literally consists of two poles and a wire that's suspended in between. Literally, that's it. It's really old, not very reliable these days. It's prone to a lot of errors, which we won't talk about now, but just bear that in mind. You've got to need line of sight, so you can't be doing an NDB approach if you're behind a mountain and the NDB is shielded or blocked by a building or mountain, whatever. Okay, so the easiest way to do that is to make sure that you adhere to the important altitudes on the plate. Okay, so very simply what you're going to need is the frequency, which is over here. So you're going to need to dial up 383 on your ADF, which I'll show you how to do it in a minute. You're going to need to know the lower safe altitudes for each sector. So this is the minimum safe altitude. Oh, sorry, not minimum safe altitude. Minimum sector altitude, 25 nautical miles from the NDB. So if you're on this side, you need to be above 5,200 feet. If you're on this side, you need to be above 5,700 feet. And if you're within 10 miles, it's 5,400 feet. Okay. So I've positioned the aircraft such that we are south of the NDB and we're going to be tracking straight outbound. We're going to avoid doing the holding pattern. If you want to know how to do a holding pattern, there is a link in the description showing you how to do it and the card above. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to tune the ADF or the automatic direction finder on our aircraft, and that will pick up and show us where the NDB is. We will then track outbound 359, correction 346 because we are Cat B, outbound for 3.5 minutes and descending from 5,200 feet to 4,600 feet. And then we will track inbound, which is the most important. Now most NDB approaches have a reversal leg. It has a holding pattern, the outbound and inbound leg. So just make sure you note all that. Okay, so when we're tracking inbound 156, before we descend to our MDA, which is our minimum decision altitude, is the lowest altitude that we can go to until we are visual, is 3810, so 3,810 feet. So we're going to dial this into our minimus, which I will show you later on. Now before we start descent, we got to make sure that the needle is plus or minus 5 degrees either side of the inbound leg. If you're in the case of a VOR, it's half scale. In an NDB, it's plus or minus 5 degrees. And once we're close enough to the airport, you're within the circling area. This little arrow here shows you the orientation. If you get this thing correct, then you can choose to decide if you want to do a straight into one-way 17. You simply join upwind and then go around, or you can position yourself downwind for 35. It's really up to you. Okay, now back in the cockpit. Right, so you can see that I positioned myself just south of the NDB. I'll leave the MFD on map mode to give you a better understanding. So what we need to do first is we need to dial up the NDB. So come up here to the NavCom page, go to audio and radios, go to ADF, click on that and dial up 0383 and hit on transfer. And then the ADF hasn't appeared, so what you need to do is go to PFD settings, go through the bearing and keep clicking till you find ADF, and there you go, the ADF needle is pointing towards the NDB station, which is over there somewhere. Okay, so first things first, let's fly towards the NDB. Oops. Okay, in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll dial the outbound leg of 346, I think it was, and then I'll talk through a few things. Okay, Now the idea is, the analogy is, if you're flying an NDB approach, the ADF will perform in a very specific way. The analogy is the head is heavy and the tail is light. So what you want to do is drag the head of the ADF onto your course. So to do that, you put the heading on the outside. So you put the heading on the left, in this case the left side of your ADF, and the head should fall and the tail will rise. Okay, see how the head of the needle is falling onto the outbound track. And likewise, if you were tracking outbound, you want the tail to rise. So what you want to do is put your heading on this side. So you can, a simple analogy that I use is heading, head track, and tail track heading. Okay, so the head of the needle is almost on. So what we can do is we can start to turn towards the ADF, correction, the NDB, to get station passage. So the NDB is actually on the east side of the airport. Now as you get closer towards the NDB, the needle will start to deflect more and more and more. It's a good idea not to chase it and just fly over it, really, because the closer you are, the more errors you're prone to, especially if you're flying directly over. So we just wait for station passage. In the meantime, what we'll do is we get our timer out, so you can press N on your keyboard, and that will bring the timer out. Make sure you have that reset. So what we want to do after we get station passage, we want to track outbound for 3.5 minutes. So the ADF is about to swing. So once it swings, right, there we go. We are tracking outbound now. We can stop the timer and we can turn to our outbound leg. So if you are not already, we can adjust the heading first. In this case, we are already on track, so we don't need to do much. Okay, so what we want to do is get the needle onto the track, so we can come across a tiny bit. In the meantime, we can start to descend to the outbound altitude of 4,600 feet. So we'll dial 4,600 feet here. You can put it into VS, 500 feet per minute, no rush. Okay. So the tail of the ADF is already on 346, so we just maintain heading. Bear in mind, if you're doing this with wind, you might want to apply some wind correction accordingly. Okay, so it's also a good idea to slow down. So I'm just going to slow it down to about 178 knots, which is your extension speed for the TBM. So really we should have slowed down before actually starting the timer, but it's fine. About there. Okay, now in the meantime, what we can do while waiting is we can set up the minimus. So we come down here, click on PDF, click on minimums, and dial in the MDA. In this case, it's 3810. So we dial 3810 minimums, barrel, enter, and it will appear. Excuse me. Yep, it will appear here. Just like you would in any airliner. Okay. Alright, so just about a minute to go. Now it's very important before we leave 4,600 feet to make sure that we're plus or minus 5 degrees either side of our inbound track. It's very important. It's also very important to make sure that your speed is under control. Now, while we're doing all that, it's a good time to make sure all your lights are on and everything is on, if you have a descent approach checklist, make sure you get it out of the way before the workload starts to get high, because you can, especially if you're dealing with ATC and whatnot. Make sure your altimeter is in the correct setting before you start the approach, because if you don't, then if somebody else is using a different altimeter setting, or if yours is wrong, then there's a chance of collision. Okay, so we're almost there, about 10 more seconds before we start our turn. Now what we'll do is we'll put the heading bug on the left side to initiate the turn, and then we'll set our course to the correct heading. Alright, so we'll just dial in the heading like so, just to get the aircraft turning. We want to be 156 inbound, so we'll turn this all the way around to 156 like that, and then once that is done, you can then set the heading. Okay, I'll just slow it a tad. Don't want to be too fast. Okay, this is almost a perfect approach. If for whatever reason the head or the tail of the needle wanders about, just use the analogy that I've told you earlier on to make the adjustments. Okay, so we're almost there. It's a little bit fiddly, this one. Okay, so we're plus or minus 5 degrees. We can now descend to 3,900 feet. VSD is down to 500 feet, no rush. So again, depends on the wind. In this case, I'm going to join upwind for 1.7 and then do a left-hand circuit once we're visual. Now we're doing this in VMC today just to show you the wonderful scenery of Western Australia. But yeah, you can see why we need to expect the lower safe altitudes, because the amount of terrain here is it can kill if you're not careful. Okay, that's what's our ADF doing? Yep, more or less on course. So we just fly down to our minimus. If you're in cloud, you want to try to escape from cloud, so fly all the way down to minima, and then if you're at the miss approach point, in this case is right above the NDB, don't see the runway or runway environmental lights, then execute the miss approach procedure, which is to turn right, track 185 and climb the 5200 feet and then start again. Okay, that's 3,900. So assuming you're visual now, let's say we're broken free of cloud, we can continue the approach and then join upwind, and then whichever leg you want. Depending on the runway, you can do a circling approach for the cross runway if you want to, the adjacent runway, it's up to you. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial. Hope you guys enjoy it and found it useful. So thank you, and I'll see you again later.